Well, for more, then we're going to cross now to Simon Mabon, professor of international politics and Middle East studies at Lancaster University. Simon, glad to have you on the show with us today. So what, in your view, ultimately led European powers to finally activate this snapback mechanism?
Well, I think it was more a case of now or never with regard to the shifting dynamics of the politics of the UN. So, with Russia taking control of the Security Council, with its revolving presidency in September, there is a limited window for this snapback to actually be enacted and for it to be enacted in a successful way without it being blocked by the Kremlin. So it really was a case of getting this over the line before the end of August, if indeed the European powers wanted to do so. And it seems, of course, that they did. They've enacted it, so it is now now in process.
I mean, it's been a while. I think you could argue that diplomacy has stagnated. Do you think that this mechanism will bring the two sides any closer to reaching a diplomatic solution? I mean, we heard from the EU earlier that they now have a great opportunity in these next 30 days to reach an agreement. But if it hasn't happened over the past couple of years, why now?
Yeah, I mean, I keep going back to this idea of good faith and who indeed is acting in good faith at this moment in time. As you say, there's been plenty of opportunities to reach a deal, to strike a deal. There was indeed a deal a decade ago, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, that lifted the sanctions that were initially placed on Iran in order to facilitate this nuclear agreement. Now, that didn't work, despite it bringing in a great deal of optimism about a possible diplomatic way of doing things around Iran's nuclear program. That didn't work. Iran has said repeatedly that it would engage diplomatically about its nuclear program. In its words, its civilian nuclear program, what it claims it is legally entitled to pursue under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. But it has also shown that in the past couple of months, when Iran has engaged diplomatically, it has been struck with military force by either the Israelis, the United States. And so it's raising a lot of doubt in the minds of the Iranians as to whether they can engage diplomatically and in good faith. And that, of course, leads to these hostile, sort of quite fearful comments, this bombastic rhetoric from officials in Tehran, which leads to a cycle of distrust amongst the European policymakers. So it really is a delicate balancing act between reading the real sort of intentions of people and looking beyond the rhetoric, because without any of that, we can't have any good faith, and without good faith, you can't have diplomacy.
I mean, especially after the American and Israeli strikes on Iran, in your view, I mean, I know information about how much damage those strikes did has been hazy and quite difficult to confirm. But do you think that its nuclear program still poses an actual threat in the short to mid-term at this particular moment in time?
Well, as you say, we just don't know. There's a lot of subterfuge. There's a lot of noise about the extent to which damage was enacted on Iran's nuclear sites. But what we do know, and this is the real crux of the matter, I think, is that there's 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium at about 60% that is unaccounted for. And I think that is really at the heart of much of this, that if Iran can account for that, if it can demonstrate that it will operate in good faith over its intentions with that, perhaps handing it over to an intermediary, handing it over to a third party, handing it over to the IAEA, for example, then I think that would go some way in really kickstarting this this round of diplomatic talks. But of course, why would Iran say that it would do that when it has claimed that it's acted in good faith in the past? So it's a really tricky one. There's a very high stakes game of poker going on right now. And at stake is not just the Iranian nuclear program, but it's the very survival of the Islamic Republic of Iran itself, I think. And there's some critics or there's some officials in Iran who would argue that this whole nuclear diplomacy is not actually about nuclear diplomacy. It is more targeted at bringing about a fall to the Iranian regime. And that's an argument that's been made for many, many years. And it's one that is used by some to say that Iran needs its nuclear weapons program. So in reply to your question, I think it is continuing to be a danger, because it's unaccounted for, and the context of all of this is highly, highly charged.
I guess what I mean is, and I guess this hits at the very question of how efficient nuclear nonproliferation has been in today's world. But given that we know that the United States and Israel are not only capable but willing, two nuclear powers willing to strike Iran, I mean, is there a real danger, especially given how weakened the regime is and how weakened its allies are, quite frankly, in the region? I mean, is this a reasonable game to be playing, given how unlikely it is that Iran will be able to get anything done?
Well, I guess in some ways there is a game of process that needs to be played. And in that respect, it's a performative game of having to look like you're going through the channels of diplomacy, trying to give Iran every opportunity to make this work. And the argument that would be put forward by those on the right, the sort of the more hawkish analysts, the more hawkish officials, if you will, would be to say that, look, we've given Iran every opportunity to engage diplomatically, and it has continually failed to do so. And the worry would be that that would lead to another round of strikes against the Iranian state, and that would be incredibly devastating. Again, inflation in Iran is high; it's over 40%. Temperatures are high. There's limited electricity, limited access to food. Healthcare is dramatically diminished. So there's a real need to get an agreement here. But again, I go back to my first answer. How many of the actors involved are operating in good faith right now?
Simon Mabon, professor at Lancaster University, thank you very much for coming on the show today.